I remember within the first 6 weeks really struggling. I can't do this. Like, I'm not smart enough. And it was my biochemistry professor. And she just looked at me in a really odd way. And she was like, have you ever been tested for dyslexia? About 25% of our brain is made up of this omega-3 fatty acid called DHA. And I'm like, interesting. I wonder if, there's something here that could work with food and nutrition and dyslexia. To me, literally changing a child's diet, that it can help their brain process information and support them, was mind-blowing. So what did I do? My entire dissertation got focused on this.
The Hidden 20% won Best Interview Podcast at the British Podcast Awards, and we couldn't have done it without you. Thank you for your support. We really want to do more, so follow, subscribe, and let's get this message out to more people. From Burberry model to leading nutritionist, Sarah Ann Macklin has advised at the European Parliament, worked on Harley Street, hosted a TEDx talk, and written for top UK publications. As a dyslexic, Sarah Ann is passionate about neurodivergence, even writing her dissertation on the relationship between diet, ADHD, and dyslexia. There's been a lot of misleading information online recently about the link between nutrition and neurodivergence, so today I'm really excited to unpack the truth. Let's get into it. Let's see how great minds think differently. Sarah Ann, tell me your diagnosis journey.
Yeah. Well, thank you, first of all, Ben, for doing this entire podcast around this, because you're heightening something that's really important. Secondly, one thing I'm going to rephrase you on is diagnosis.
Okay.
So I am really funny about calling it a diagnosis because it sounds like, and from people who've listened to my introduction, I'm a nutritionist. I kind of worked in the medical field for a very long time. And I have a podcast called Live Well Be Well, which all brings on kind of science and the medical kind of side of things. When I talk about a diagnosis on the show, it's normally like a terminal illness or a chronic disease. And I don't think that we should be calling ourselves that we had a diagnosis, because it sounds like we've got a lifelong illness. And actually, it's the complete opposite of that. So I'm trying to rename that kind of moment and not think about it as a diagnosis. The moment you were told your superpower.
Okay.
I think something like that is really, or the moment you became aware that you had the skill set. Because I think if that was how it was given to me, and when I was 24, I went back to university as a mature student after having an international modelling career, and I kind of changed everything overnight and went back to school, which I kind of look back now and I remember saying, why am I going to go back to school? Because I hated school. I was never good at school. I, was at every bottom set and every teacher was angry at me all the time. And I remember within the first 6 weeks really struggling at school. I went to my professor. Well, first of all, I cried to my mum and said, I'm sorry, I failed you. I shouldn't have changed a career where I was earning loads of money and gone back to school to go and study a profession that at the time no one cared about. Like, health was not spoken about. And why the hell have I studied science? Like, who was I thinking I was? And so she said, well, go and speak to your professor. So I did, and I went into her room and I remember sitting there shaking. And I just had this shame of her looking at me. Not that she was, but that was kind of my internal critic. And I just said, I'm really sorry, I can't do this. Like, I'm not smart enough. And it was my biochemistry professor. And she just looked at me in a really odd way. And she was like, no, I was going to call you in. And I thought, great, she's even noticed it. And she said, I want to speak to you. Have you ever been tested for dyslexia? And I just looked at her at like 24 years of age. And I was like, no. Surely that would have been picked up at school. And she was like, first of all, you're not smart. And that was the first time anyone had ever said that to me. Everyone in my schooling life before had called me unsmart and thick and stupid. And now that sounds horrific, but I think being a kid in the 90s, I mean, this language was very different. And she said, I really want you to go to get tested. And yeah, it was amazing. Within like the first 5 minutes, they said, just so you know, we're going to carry on this 2.5-hour examination, but you're severely dyslexic, within the first 5 minutes. And I was so, ashamed to talk about it. I remember kind of calling my mum and telling her and being like, why did you never realize? And I never kind of had any awareness of how to really take that stigma away. There was just, these are the tools that you can use. You can have a computer for free. You can record an audio and listen to it back if you can't kind of concentrate in lectures, and you should use lots of colours. So the moment I figured that out was the moment I had the most compassion for myself I've had in my life. And somebody telling me that I wasn't thick was huge revelation to me. I kind of kept that at the forefront of my mind. And I went from flunking everything. I remember those like first 6 weeks when I was going to pull out because we were going to have to do a biochemistry presentation. And I was like, there is no way I can talk about something called oxidative phosphorylation.
Whatever that is.
I can't even talk about it. It was like part of the energy transport chain. God, it's taking me back. And I remember being so afraid of I was basically making up my own enzymes because I couldn't spell them. And I was addicted to making sure that if I could learn in my own way, I'd be the best I could. And I got a first, and I got 100%, and I got a letter from the government. And I wanted to say, like, I hate saying like I got a first, but it's one of those things that gives people hope because I honestly was about to drop out. So the fact that I actually passed was like tremendous. The fact that I got a good grade and left the exam early with a smile on my face was like something I would never have imagined. I mean, I don't think my parents imagined I'd ever like graduate.
It sounds like ultimately from kind of the extremities of like, I want to give up, I want to stop, to then going, actually, I'm dyslexic and that's okay, and I'm going to figure it out. How did you figure it out in terms of how you learn to then get to a first and pass with flying colours?
It was really hard. I think I had to really have a self-belief. It was a lot of extra hours. And I think part of my dyslexia was my processing speed. So for me, I would then go into the lecture and record everything. And I wouldn't try and do what I always did, was really listen and make notes. And then by the time I've made a note, I've forgotten what they're saying. And so I would be kind of like 4 steps behind everyone, which is how I felt like at school. So I was like, I'm going to use technology to my advantage. So I would record everything. And then the way I learn, which is why I love podcasts, is I would then go for a run and listen to the audio on my headphones. So I wasn't then having to kind of watch somebody try and recite something that just wasn't sounding that exciting. I would then put it onto my headphones. I'd be in nature. I'd be running, and movement really helped me process.
Okay.
And I'd have those moments where I didn't then feel the pressure that I had to learn everything in that hour. I was going to forget it. And so I would run, and then I would come back and I'd go, oh my gosh. And in my own brain, I'd be making patterns of what was making sense.
Mm-hmm.
And then I would come down and write it in my own language.
Nice.
And I would then do it in brain diagrams, like mind maps with different colors. And it sounds crazy, but I covered my entire room in brain maps. And I remember people I was dating at the time coming in and being like, who is this odd person?
Like a scene out of Memento.
What is going on with all of these equations that are around your room? But it's the way that I had to kind of immerse myself in it to understand it. But that I would do that, and I would run every day and I would listen to it. And it was a way that I had to tell myself, and it's still to this day, I don't know if you have this as an entrepreneur, but I don't do things how everyone else does it. And I think we're taught in society, or I definitely felt this, even on my own kind of journey into business. No, this is how you got to get up. You got to go to the gym. You got to be done by 7. You got to be at your desk. You got to be hyper-focused, make your checklist. And this is how you become successful. Mm-hmm. It doesn't work for me in that way. And so I had to like really shake off this, like, this is how I have to have my day set up, because I needed to figure out what worked for me.
Yep.
So having that self-belief. So I'd say for any kind of parent, it's like understanding with that child, what is something that works for them, and like leaning into that. And the more that I learned what my strengths were, because I only ever focused on my weaknesses for my entire life. I was like, how can I get better at spelling? How can I get better at writing notes and understanding this really quickly when it's being taught to me? As soon as I forgot all of that and I focused on what I was good at, because I had no idea what my strengths were, everything for me changed. So I'd say like focus on what their strengths are, lean into that, and then focus everything around that. Because that will give them energy.
It's so interesting when you think, we're at school, most people, till they're 18. And your life is kind of your routine, your schedule is mostly driven by the school.
100%.
And then suddenly you come into the adult world. And so we're conditioned to kind of almost not take responsibility and almost not learn how we work and how we think and how we process. It's so much about finding what works for you, and part of that personally, and it sounds like for you as well, comes from understanding your brain and how you work and what works best for you.
The really big thing I have here, and I'm still learning it, is trusting myself. So kind of going on the business journey as a solo founder through everything, very hard to trust yourself and make decisions that you think are inherently right. And everyone's going to give you advice, and everyone gave me advice. And I half the time followed their advice, and it just never went right. And trusting yourself is the biggest thing in all of this, because you might think totally differently. But that's why your brain is unique and amazing. And that's why you end up making bigger moves than other people and taking bigger risks, because you can see something totally differently. And I think that's what I wish I knew earlier, was that my brain could see things that other people couldn't see, and I would map things very differently, and people couldn't understand why I'm doing something, or that's never going to work. I mean, I went into this field when nobody spoke about it and nobody cared, but I could see at the end that for me, this was going to happen. People needed to connect to their health. Mental health was huge and it was really undervalued. Physical health was really undervalued. Why is nobody communicating about this? Everyone in my life told me to not do this.
And you are, I am now fortunate that to meet lots of dyslexics, and the one thing that not being dyslexic and being envious of dyslexics is common to all the dyslexics I've met, is this ability to see this, like make these patterns but see this whole picture. But it's not seeing the whole picture in 2D, it's being able to see it in 3D and in the future. I can do the kind of like, this is how I think the tape's going to play out and this is how to get to the end point. But I struggle to kind of, I see that like a sort of, a dual carriageway, like a motorway, whereas dyslexics have this brain that sees it like a spaghetti junction, but it all works.
It's all interconnected. It's all interconnected. And I'd say to any dyslexic, when they see that, trust your intuition and just go. Because when that's happened to me, it's changed my life. And when I've seen it, I've then sometimes been too afraid to do it and then seek advice elsewhere and then try to create it into a very linear system. And I really remember, and I will always be very thankful of that of my biochemistry professor and the person who was wonderful, who took me through my kind of DDS examination. She was really amazing at the end, because she said to me two things. She said, the schooling system's going to hinder your superpowers and what you've got in your skill set. But once you're out of this, all you have to do is just get through this. Once you're out, your brain is going to be phenomenal. And I remember her saying that. And that gave me kind of an energy to start being a bit of an entrepreneur on the side. So I was starting to create things as I was still at school. And that was really interesting. I was like, no, I'm going to build outside and then have to go into that linear system thinking while I'm at school, but I need my kind of creative juices to start flowing whilst I'm out. And then she said to me, and how you can understand that is, say that you're going to go into Sainsbury's, into a shop, and you need to buy a spaghetti bolognese for dinner. A normal linear person thinking will go in, get the spaghetti, get the mince, get the onion, get the garlic, get the tomato sauce and leave. You will go in and you'll be like, I've got a list. But you'll be like, how can I make the sauce? How can I enhance that with flavors? Tomorrow, if I wanted to add this into the dish to kind of make it into a batch style, what would I get? And your brain goes into this amazing spiral system that you see a completely different picture. In the schooling system, that's going to be hindered. You need to know X equals Y, and that's all you can do. But outside, if you want to kind of go into anything else, this will be a really big kind of skill set for you.
That nicely leads us into nutrition. And the world of food. How did you go from, I'm going to do this epic science degree, and then actually I'm going to funnel that down into going into the world of nutrition? How did that happen?
Oh my gosh. I think my teachers thought I was mad, genuinely, because I'm sure you can get quite obsessive about things and you need to know everything. And I've realized,
trees.
Yeah, right? So you need to know everything about trees.
Yes.
He's told me an amazing fact today. Thank you very much. I'm going to remember that for next time. When I found out I had dyslexia, for me, it was like, what can I do? How can I enhance this? Like, if this is something that I need to work with, like, how do I work with it? And obviously, when you're kind of studying biochemistry, you're figuring out how the body works and how everything's interacting and the cellular production that's going on. And for me, I was like, well, what about the brain? And I remember getting to a module where they were talking about essential omega-3 fatty acids and brain health. And there was one thing that struck me where they were talking about 25% of our brain is made up of this omega-3 fatty acid called DHA. And I'm like, interesting. I wonder if, there's something here that could work with food and nutrition and dyslexia. So a bit of research later, Mr. Google told me about a doctor at Cambridge who was studying exactly this. So I then had to find out where she was speaking, when she was speaking, how often she was speaking.
Yeah, what she have breakfast. Let's find it all out.
I gotta find it all out.
Yeah.
So I just started turning up to all these lectures that she was doing.
Okay.
And I was,
Stalker alert.
Stalker alert. And I could not believe the research that she was doing. She, again, was obsessed about understanding about nutrition and dyslexia and neurodiversity in general. And she gave this kind of amazing Venn diagram where she talked a lot about, and back then, remember this is like nearly 15 years ago, this wasn't really spoken about. Like ADHD wasn't really spoken about. Autism was definitely not spoken about. Dyspraxia, who the hell knew what dyspraxia was? So she put it up when she was talking and it was all overlapping. And she said, normally if you've got one, you're overlapping to the other. And this is kind of what it looks like. And she was really interested again about the brain health. And so she was obsessed about if you had fatty fish as a child, would that really help you with your kind of chronic reading age or your attention deficit disorder? And she was finding like incredible results that when they gave children oily fish, they did overcome their chronic reading age so much than their peers that didn't have dyslexia. To me, literally changing a child's diet that it can help their brain process information and support them was mind-blowing. So what did I do? My entire dissertation got focused on this. All I wanted to know was, and I was experimenting on myself, so I was increasing oily fish. I was like, what about supplements? How does supplements work? And I went deeper and deeper and deeper. What happens in utero? What happens with a child? Is it fully genetic? Is it not fully genetic? What happens if the mother doesn't have oily fish?
Love this.
So I became hyper obsessive, which I realize I've got part of when I'm really passionate about something. I start calling my mum up. Mum, how was I, or how were you when you were carrying me as a child? She was like, you were the devil child and I couldn't eat anything and I was really, really sick. And I would run and grab a bit of crusty bread and that's all I ate. So you didn't eat any fatty fish. Oh my gosh, no, I was so malnourished. I lost weight in pregnancy. Funny enough, I was like, wow, what about your third trimester when the baby's brain is formed? That's when it's the most critical to have this fatty fish. And your DHA stores, which is this longer chain omega-3 fatty acid that 25% of your cellular membrane is made up of, increases in the third half because the mum also needs it. And so she also needs to produce it for her child. So you need to increase the dosages that you're having. She didn't touch any oily fish and she was hyper malnourished. So kind of in the third trimester of her pregnancy, I wasn't getting the nutrients that I needed. So for me, this was like mind blowing. I was like, is this being taught to women that are pregnant? Yeah. Especially if you've got a predisposed genetic condition.
Yes.
And so I basically did my entire dissertation around this.
Love it.
And I wanted to know from being pregnant to now, like, if you include oily fish as a mother and you include oily fish as a child and you include oily fish as an adult, can this have a significant benefit? And what happens if you take supplements? Because a lot of people don't want to eat oily fish. And what I found is that if you do have oily fish, it can have a dramatic effect. Supplements was kind of inconclusive on what I found. And the reasons why is because a lot of supplements kind of change in their values of what they're having of omega-3. So some might have another omega-3 compound called EPA, which is not the compound that we need for our brain.
Okay.
So when you're looking at supplements, what I would advise is to make sure that it's mostly DHA and make sure that most of the supplement is that, because a lot of supplements use bulking agents. So actually, kind of 60% of the supplement is a bulking agent. So again, that's why a lot of evidence, I believe, is quite inconclusive in that sector.
So is it therefore the best advice or the best way to get these omegas is oily fish?
Have oily fish.
That's number one.
Number one. And it's always food first. It's such a big thing for me.
Food first. I like that phrase. Mm-hmm. This is like, look me, I've crossed my arms. I've turned away from you. I'm like, I want to stop the recording so I can go away and think about this. So do I eat a lot of oily fish? I don't eat a lot of oily fish, actually. But now I feel like I need to.
Mm-hmm. And also it's anti-inflammatory. So we talk a lot about, so if we even reverse it as well, so we're not even just thinking about neurodivergent brains, inflammation is disease is caused by inflammatory processes, right? So we want to try to be creating as many anti-inflammatory processes in the body as possible. And fish is anti-inflammatory. Okay. So the EPA that's in fish, as well as the DHA, has anti-inflammatory processes. So it's like a double whammy. So
and the best oily fish?
So oily fish is mackerel, sardines, herring, kippers, salmon, trout, anything that's got a lot of oils. But like mackerel and sardines are kind of the very best that you can get. Anything that's that really oily, anything that's a white fish doesn't have it, and tuna
anything
doesn't.
that really smells.
Anything that really smells.
Anything you put in the microwave and you're in an office and everybody hates you.
If you got that out on a plane, people would be like, "Why are you sitting next to me?
Plane,
get off."
Train, tube.
Yes, people look at you in like discontent, like, "Why have you done this? You selfish."
Forget the cod, the haddock. Forget those guys.
Forget the tuna.
So tuna's not an oily fish?
No, it was removed, I think, 4 years ago because it's not got the high enough levels of EPA and DHA, yeah.
Those levels are what constitutes whether it's an oily fish or not?
Yeah. Yeah.
That is really interesting.
Yeah. So there is things people can do nutrition-wise to kind of support the neurodivergent traits, as well as, looking at your gut microbiome, which is really, really important. But for me, like knowing that we can kind of control this a little bit, I find quite mind-blowing.
So what have they done? This study gets done 15 years ago, amazing results for kids who are dyslexic. What's then happened what else has happened in the last 15 years that you've come across that just further backs that up? Or why are 85% of kids at school still feeling really ashamed who are diagnosed dyslexic? Like, why have we not sorted this out?
I know. I think this is the biggest thing. I remember reading, my mum, bless her, kept a memory box and brought it up to me, and she showed me my school reports. And when I read it, I felt really sad for the small Sarah that went to school and was told every day, gosh, she's so frustrating, she can't seem to get this, because maths was never my strong point. And seeing the anger in the teachers, and I can imagine, right, teaching a child that's struggling to get a concept is ultra frustrating. But like, do you understand that child? Do you speak to them? And I went to a state school. So for them, it's like, we've just got to try and get the kids through class. Like, we've not got much funding. I'm exhausted. But I do think that we just need more support at home and having conversations. I think this is the biggest thing, like reducing the stigma. Like, it was never spoken about at school. If you had ADHD, you were just a kid. You were just naughty. They didn't understand how that brain worked. And I have a niece who's got autism. And my sister, amazingly, is now very aware of, like, how can we understand more about her brain and talk about it as a superpower. And being an aunt to somebody who I know has got neurodivergent brain, I really wanted to bring her. If it wasn't school time, she would be here today. To understand, like, the superpowers that you can have. I find it really sad. I felt really sad that 85% of kids still feel hyper ashamed about this. I do believe that it's starting to change. I mean, for me, the only person I could relate to at the point he spoke about this was like Richard Branson, because he was one of the only people talking about it back then. He was the only person to like have the vulnerability to say, this is great. I didn't know what the difference between net and gross profit was. And I was like, great, either do I. And seeing
but I feel
role
like he
models,
was a lone voice.
He was a lone voice. And now having literally podcasts like this, people speak about it, people to not be ashamed and to see what people have built, I think that's how we reduce the stigma. And I think, I don't know about you, but there does seem to be a trend now of people saying, oh, I've got ADHD. Do you have ADHD, or do you feel kind of connected to being part of a group that is talking a lot about doing well and their hidden traits and things like that? I'm really happy to see it.
They're not adjectives.
Exactly. It's something that if you have it, it's not just these things where they come up in your life and, they're a bit of a nuisance. You live with this day in, day out. You're born with it
most of the time.
You feel it all the time. And most of the time you felt like an outcast for the most of your entire life.
Can good diet and good nutrition improve neurodivergence?
I believe so, yes.
Can bad nutrition or poor diet cause neurodivergence?
It can't cause it, but it will worsen it.
So it can not help it. It
Absolutely.
can hinder it. It can
can be more detrimental.
It can be more detrimental.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because I see on the internet people saying that bad diet causes ADHD.
It does not cause ADHD.
You know, these, or
It's
just
not-
eating sugary foods.
Yeah. It's not like depression or anxiety where you're not born as a depressive child, okay? You're not physically born with something that you could never get out of.
Yeah.
Depression sometimes does need an intervention of an SSRI to help the kind of chemical imbalance. But other depressions don't always need that. Other depressions can be changed by lifestyle factors, right? By reducing your alcohol, by having really good sleep, by having a really good diet, by getting exercise, by being in nature. All of these things can help counterbalance depression. If you've got ADHD, it doesn't just come on because you've got a bad diet. It's something that you are born with, but a bad diet can massively affect how much you're concentrating. So if you're living on ultra-processed foods, loads of alcohol, sleepless nights, you're already more agitated. Like somebody who hasn't got a ADHD will already feel they can't concentrate. If you add ADHD and all of these things into the mix, you're going to be like 10 times worse than that normal person that can't focus. So trying to like work with everything in an equilibrium, put it all together, is going to give you your best chances of having that super skill set that we know is so powerful with ADHD. But we've really got to work kind of in a micro environment on like, okay, how much sleep are you getting? How much rest are you getting? Like that, all of those things are really important so you can use that skill set. What's your blood glucose levels like? If they're constantly up and down, and we should have a flat line, but if there are real spikes and then you're crashing very, very quickly, like that is not going to be helping your focus at all. So trying to put all of these compounds together is so, so important to kind of help enhancing that skill set.
What do you think are the principles, I guess, diet, nutrition wise, to help a neurodivergent brain?
Omega-3 fatty acids.
Boom.
And I really want to kind of counterbalance by saying make sure it is the oily fish. So a lot of people who are a plant-based diet will say, well, I'm eating my omega-3 fatty acids. And they are, but they're eating not the longer chains. They're eating the shorter chains.
Okay.
And so this is like a little bit of a difference. So if you are a plant-based eater, please, please, please supplement with an algae supplement. So the reason how fish get these oils in them is because they eat the algae.
Amazing.
And that's how it's transferred to us. You can only find EPA and DHA in oily fish. Now, many years ago, we could eat these shorter chain fatty acids that were in walnuts and chia seeds and all the plant foods that we're talking about. And what it would happen is it would easily be transferred into these longer chains. Over evolution, we've become very lazy and we've lost the enzyme to do that. So it now shares it with the enzyme of omega-6.
Wow. We as human beings, our genetic makeup, our bodies now
lost that
have
enzyme.
lost an enzyme
To translate this shorter chain omega-3 fatty acid into the longer one. So now it shares it with omega-6. You know, if we had a very balanced diet of omega-6 to omega-3 ratio, it'd be fine, but we don't. I think it's now a 20-to-1 ratio. It could be an 18-to-1, but I think it's a 20-to-1 ratio now. I should have checked that before I came on. But we have a very high omega-6 fatty acid diet. So our enzymes never used to kind of bring down this shorter chain omega-3 fatty acid into the longer chain. So a lot of people will say, yeah, well, it can get kind of like pulled down into these longer chain fatty acids. No, because omega-6 kind of takes that enzyme to use it.
Okay.
So what's really important is that if you are still eating these fantastic plant foods, you're still having an omega-3 fatty acid algae supplement, because you will not be getting enough of the levels that I'm talking about that are beneficial for your brain.
Do the good ones come with algae?
With algae supplement, yes. So if it's got the algae supplement in it, will have the DHA and the EPA values. For a neurodivergent person, I want you to be having mostly DHA. So do check on the back of the packet, see how much DHA is in there and see what the ratio is between EPA and DHA. Get the DHA. That's what we want for our brain health. 25% of our cellular membrane is made of this.
Okay.
And if you think about it, it's fluid. So it's constantly having to be kind of re-popped in.
Yes.
If we don't have enough of it in our diet, you know, our brains are clever. It's like, I'll get another fat. I'm going to get cholesterol and I'm just going to shove it in there. Cholesterol's much more rigid. Okay, it's not as fluid as omega-3 and the DHA. So this is why we kind of see kind of a more detrimental effect for not having enough omega-3 fatty acids.
But you can just do this through fish, through oily fish.
That's how I would love it to be.
Okay.
But if you're a plant-based eater,
yes,
you're not going to be having any oily fish. So my 2 recommendations are making sure you're having an algae supplement, and please make sure you're having B12 because that's essential as well. You can't be getting that either.
What about magnesium?
Oh, that's a big conversation,
for neurodivergent
isn't it?
brains.
The research I'm not so specific on just for neurodivergent brains, but everyone I believe should be taking in a magnesium supplement because 70% of us are deficient within the population. And then if you're somebody who loves exercise, you're 10 to 20% more likely to be more deficient as well because exercise reduces your magnesium values.
Okay.
So if you're someone that goes to the gym a lot, it's really important that you are supplementing with magnesium.
So for a child or an adult, actually, who is ADHD and on the go a lot, hyperactive, very physical.
Mm-hmm. It's very calming.
Yeah, so they will be losing more magnesium than the neurotypical adult because they're moving more, combined with the fact that they're ADHD, so they're probably going to be even more deficient in something calming like magnesium. Magnesium
is amazing for your nerves, yeah. So I would say if you are a child, getting a very good multivitamin is essential. You're basically covering every base. For an adult, you can be even more hyper-specific. Magnesium is really important for our nervous system and for our HPA axis, which is basically the part of your brain that controls your cortisol levels. So when we're stressed, our pituitary gland releases a hormone and it comes into this thing called the HPA axis, which then ends up with our adrenals releasing cortisol. Within that, magnesium is the biggest cofactor. Okay. So if you're very deficient in magnesium, it doesn't help kind of break the circuit of the loop. So it's really important to make sure that if you are somebody that is constantly kind of maybe more anxious or more on the go, to have magnesium is a really kind of healthy benefit to add into your diet. And you can even do it by magnesium baths. You don't have to take a supplement. So you can even have like 2 to 3 magnesium baths a week because it's a different way of it becoming bioavailable to your body through the skin.
So as a neurodivergent nutritionist, you've got access to so much information that is consistently, from the outside looking in, changing or being debunked or being proven right or wrong, or it's a fad, or just it feels like this constant flurry within the world of nutrition. How do you deal with that, of trying to understand what's going on, trying to pick through what's true and what's not, both in how you advise people and your clients, but also in how you adopt your own practices within your own diet? How do you do that?
It's a big question. It's a big question.
Yeah.
I think when you are scientifically trained, you have more of a rigorous eye on how to look at studies. And I remember when I was studying, and I remember going to lots of magazines because, my former life was a model. And I was obsessed with, who's writing the health sections? Oh, the beauty journalist is. Like, hang on, that person doesn't know how to read a good meta-analysis. They don't even know what a meta-analysis is, and that's kind of like the hierarchy of studies. They don't know whether it's in an animal, whether it's in a human, whether it's a randomized controlled placebo trial. They don't know how good the study is. So for me, like the first thing is that I can just look at the study design very, very quickly and see, okay, is this worth me looking into, or is it worth me just completely disacknowledging? If it's done in a rodent, we can't translate that into humans yet. So, a lot of people talk about studies. I already know.
Forget about it.
Okay, well, that's interesting. Let's look back at this in 5 years. If it's one study with a very small participant size and there's no placebo on there, again, okay, we can't draw we can maybe draw association, but we can't say there's a causation there, which means that it has a direct effect. And so there's so many different in the kind of the pyramid of studies, from observational and anecdotal all the way up to like a systematic review, which maybe a systematic review might take 100 studies and look at, was there any correlation? Were they all placebo controlled? What was the study design like? And so they're the ones that you really want to be taking note of. And I think when any type of documentary comes out, like What the Health, or all these ones that kind of blew up, they were very specific in cherry picking evidence that worked for them.
Okay.
And so I could sit here and say anything and back it up by science. And I'm putting like little quotation marks there.
Yes.
Because there's studies that prove and disprove everything. But what you want to be is like, is there a body of evidence that sits and supports one thing? And is there a direct correlation? If there's not a direct correlation, you've got to be really careful about what you say. And I think what's really important from a nutrition standpoint is everything that we're discussing, from eating fatty fish and, being aware of your magnesium levels. And I say the magnesium because it's our soil health of why we have such low magnesium levels. Our food isn't rich in magnesium from the get-go.
Was it?
It was. Oh, yeah, it was.
So
it was.
I'm so glad you're here, because
this is what's really important, right? So looking at that, the things that I'm talking about isn't a trend, isn't a fad, is nothing extreme. I'm not asking people to eat high doses of omega-3. I'm asking them to eat 2 portions of oily fish a week. Nothing on what I'm talking about is hyper extreme. And I'm very aware of talking about anything to hyper extreme, because when you take anything out of an equilibrium, there's never a good effect. But the problem is, none of us know where our baseline levels are on nutrient values. None of us go and have regular health checks. So we're kind of just shooting in the dark here. We're kind of thinking like, well, maybe I should take a magnesium supplement. Where are your levels? Do we even know what your levels are? Vitamin D, it's advised that everyone takes a vitamin D supplement. We do know the majority of us are below our par on our vitamin D levels, and every single cell in our body has a vitamin D receptor. So we know it's hyper important. But where are you? You might be needing a much higher level than what the government are telling you.
And you can have too much.
And you can have too much. Vitamin D is a fat-soluble vitamin, which means that in high doses it can become toxic.
Yes.
Harry's coming to say hello, which is my dog.
We do have we do have another guest. Sorry,
we have another guest, so we haven't
introduced. Put him in the guest intro.
I think he's very upset that we've not spoken about him yet. But I think what's really important with vitamin D, the fact that most studies do show that it's quite rare for it to become toxic, but there are a few that do show that it can be. But I think what's more detrimental is not having a vitamin D supplement. So 10 micrograms. Is what's important. So 1,000 is what you should be looking for. 10, 1U, which is how you should be seeing it. It might be written in 2 different aspects. But making sure that you're having that. But just go to your doctor and ask for a blood test. Like, they will give you a blood test for your vitamin D levels. And then you can understand where you should be supplementing. So it's understanding these biomarkers. But on the bigger thing of fads and trends, it is so overwhelming. And what I try to say to anyone who comes through my door, if you were eating a balanced diet, if you were having fruit and vegetables in your diet, if you're trying to not have too many ultra-processed foods, you're doing good. But I think what we're trying to get to is this like hyper-extremism. And we're trying to push and pull our diet into different aspects, and we're not even hitting the basics. Like, most people will take all these supplements and then have loads of ultra-processed foods in their diet.
Yes.
That's not going to be helping. Yes. And so what I'm all about is like, let's just bring it back to the core.
Therefore make it simple.
Make it simple. This is the biggest thing. If you're stressing, this might blow your mind. If you're stressing about nutrition so much, that will also change your physiology of how you're responding to that food.
Whoa. Whoa. Say that again.
So if you're hyper stressed about how you are going to respond to food or your diet that you're having, that mindset will have a physiological change in how you metabolize that food.
Wow. Regardless of whether it's healthy or not healthy food.
Yes.
Do you know anything about the nutritional value of a carrot now versus 20 years ago, 50 years ago, 100 years ago?
Yes. And I will give you the study.
Okay.
In the last 70 years, there's an amazing study that has looked at this.
Okay.
And they've looked at the soil health, and they've looked at the nutritional levels of our food, and they have absolutely catapulted in what a carrot held 50 to 70 years ago to what it holds now.
Because what worries me is we give all the, whether it's 30 plants a week or however many fruit, veg, all the rest of it, and we can bring this simplicity of, whole foods and natural and simple and not kind of anything extreme.
Yeah.
Yet our food is not nutritious enough to sustain us. That's my great worry.
Oh, it's the biggest worry. And do you know what's something that's really interesting? Because I had a geologist come on and talk to me about this study on the show because I was really fascinated about it. Because, we're telling people to eat 5 portions of fruit and vegetables a day.
Yep.
We know that's not sufficient. It's meant to be 7 or 9, but the government are too afraid to say that because we can't even hit our quota of 5. It's only 21% of us that have our 5 a day. So if we're starting to tell people to eat 7 or 9, they're just going to stop. So what's really interesting is there's a kind of a big trendy moment of like, I'm going to have organic and I'm going to go and buy this from wherever supermarket it is and it's double the price and it's much healthier for me. No, it's not. And I'll tell you why, because that's traveled from South America. So the time from it's being harvested to getting on a plane to coming here, it's lost 70% of its nutritional value.
Yeah.
A lot of the food that's frozen, and a lot of people turn their nose up at it, actually locks in the nutritional content of food much quicker from harvest.
Let me tell you, my peas up in Lincolnshire go from field to freezer in 90 minutes.
There you go.
Boom, locked, stopped. Peas. Don't get me started talking about peas.
You've got peas.
They're the wonder.
And I feel like you're quite a green man.
I love green. I also have peas tattooed on my knuckles. Yeah.
Oh, great.
Peas. More fibre in a cup of peas than a slice of wholemeal. More vitamin C in a cup of peas than an orange. Yeah, they're wonderful.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
So don't get, unless you're going to Ben's farm to literally buy some peas, do not get derailed by this kind of organic kind of uprise that's happening.
Frozen's okay.
Yeah,
frozen's good.
Frozen's good. You might still get a bit of the pesticides on it, which is not the best. But if you're trying to look at the nutritional value that's locked in, frozen fruit and veg half the time, unless you're buying it from the ground or from a farmer that's next door to you, or you're growing it in your back garden, if you are, I salute you, well done.
Yes.
Then frozen could be a better option. But I'm finding it very hard in the health sector at the moment. It's become quite elitist. And I never want anyone to feel that to be healthy, you have to be rich to have this lifestyle. You don't. But it's kind of become this trend and a lot of things have become much more expensive. I remember when kale made its kind of way to the field about 10 years ago. And my dad was like, kale was a pauper's food. He was like, no one ate it. It's like you only ate that if you had nothing else to eat. And I'm like, well, now it's one of the most expensive vegetables you can buy because it's become this health trend.
And they made it curly.
And
black.
And black, exactly.
Yeah.
So I kind of think, don't try and fall into these things of just too many health trends. Keep it simple. Buy tin chickpeas. They're great for you. Buy frozen peas. They're amazing for you. Buy good bags of full, not milled, but whole grain oats. They're good for you. These things aren't expensive especially if you buy them in bulk, but they're going to do wonders for your brain.
So for dyslexic adults listening, going, oh my God, yeah, people said that to me at school and, oh yeah, actually I can think really big and actually it's not all bad. Are there we've talked a lot about omega-3s, anything else specifically for dyslexic neurodivergent brains?
For me, that's where my field has really narrowed. Something that I think I really want to make people who are aware of with neurodivergent brains is your gut microbiome. Mm-hmm. So it's really, really essential that you try to harness that as much as possible. And I'm going to talk about this within kind of the mental health sector, which is something that I also do a lot of research in and I'm very, very passionate about, the kind of mind and the gut connection. 90% of our serotonin and how we feel is made within our gut. So a lot of people think it's made within our brains. It's not. It crosses our blood-brain barrier, which is really, really key. So fostering our gut health. So if you're somebody who, and I'm kind of now making this into the bigger picture thinking, but if you do have dyslexia or neurodivergency, you might be quite an anxious person. You might feel quite stigmatized. You might feel that you're not good enough and therefore you create a lot of anxiety within yourself, which is going to be impacting your gut microbiome very significantly. So trying to focus on your gut microbiome is really, really important to kind of help support your mental health. So what I want to be saying is making sure you're having enough fiber, making sure you're having enough whole grains within your diet, making sure you're doing breathing exercises because that already puts you into rest and digest. So a lot of us just focus on food for our gut microbiome, but also breathing, meditation is one of the biggest things that can help connect our vagus nerve, which runs from our stomachs and our guts all the way to our brains, our hypothalamus. And they talk to one another. And so when we're very, very stressed, it sends a signal straight through down to our vagus nerve into our gut, say, I'm really stressed. The gut microbiome shuts off. It's like we do not need blood coming to here at all to digest any food. We need blood going to the heart to pump cortisol. So your digestive system stops and it breaks. And if you're running from a line, of course you do not need to be digesting your croissant that you ate at 9 o'clock this morning.
Yes.
So trying to do some breathing exercises around the nutrition that you're eating is really, really important because it helps calm sensors into your gut microbiome to say, actually, Sarah, we're okay. We don't need to be anxious. And then that helps the efficiency of the gut microbiome work better.
Reminds me of Heston Blumenthal sitting where you were sat and him talking me through eating a cheese sandwich on a plane and eating it really slowly. And I don't want to use the word mindfully because I feel like that's a bit wishy-washy, but being so present on thinking about where the bread came from, where the cheese was made, who packed the sandwich, the butter, just thinking about all of those things. And therefore, being on a plane in a fairly high anxiety environment and yet being able to slow down by literally just concentrating on the sandwich.
It's so important. I think we speak about these things in isolation. We speak about nutrition in isolation. We speak about mindfulness in isolation. We speak about breath work in isolation. They all need to come together to have that effect. If I'm stress eating, we all stress eat, right? We all do it. It's not having the effects that we want it to be having. So our mindset is so powerful on how we digest this food. It's so powerful. I'm such a big believer in food as a connection. Food is about what brings people together. Food is about what brings pleasure. Food is about also feeling worthy. So you know that you deserve half an hour to sit there and enjoy something. I think when we try to kind of cut that out and just use it as one mechanism, which I can really understand when people are super busy and we have that all the time, but to always have that, we kind of are taking out what food is meant to be, which is this amazing thing of bringing the family around one table,
yes,
sharing your stories, and as Heston said, kind of sitting there and having it with yourself. But so much about mindful eating is you can do it mindfully when you're with friends or when you're with family because you're stopping each bite because you're asking a question.
I can't do that. That's right.
And so you break down this I'm not going to shovel everything in my mouth and because it takes 20 minutes for your receptors in your gut to know that you're full. So it sends a mechanism feedback to say to your brain, oh, okay, Ben's full now. I don't need to eat anymore. And a lot of the reason why people feel, oh my gosh, I feel so, my stomach is descended and I have to go undo my button is because they've overeaten. Their stretch receptors in their stomach haven't had time to go, wait, whoa, I've had enough. So normally it takes 20 minutes from the moment you start.
That's why fast food is
it's
fast food, right?
Yeah, because you also don't need to chew it.
Yep.
And it's very similar to wet textures as well. Anything that's very hard that you have to really get your saliva in to chew, you have to chew it more. So you break it down more in your mouth before it's going down into your gut microbiome.
How many times should we chew our food?
Oh God, I shouldn't say because people are going to be I'm never going to do it. I'm so aware of saying what's true versus what I know people are going to achieve.
What can we aim for?
The science will say 30 times. Okay. I do not, and I will not ever chew my food 30 times. So I know what the science says. I still don't do it. So I know that if you are, again, chewing your food 30 times and growing your own fruit and veg at home, you are literally doing the best
are not
possible.
Human.
You're not human. You're Brian Johnson, if you're listening to this will be you. But I would say, about 10 times to chew your food that's in your mouth. You're kind of halfway there. And you're doing much better.
Why is 30 times? Why should we be chewing our food that much?
So it's not going down in a fully formed state into your gut microbiome. So a lot of the things like acid reflux, I'm sure you felt when your food gets dislodged kind of in your windpipe going down. Using the saliva is the first part of your digestion. People think digestion starts in your stomach. It doesn't. It starts in your mouth. You've got a pH 2 in your mouth that starts breaking down all of the things that you need to take through into your system.
Which is why we salivate we see this all the time in drinks. It's why, the aperitif occasion is so incredible for preparing you to then eat a meal with bitterness and all, because ultimately you're producing more saliva.
Well, a big thing is that if I told you to now, actually, let's just do it.
Okay.
Close your eyes.
Don't like doing that, but okay.
Feel comfortable.
No, but it's okay.
We're going to take you to your farm. We're going to take you to your house.
Okay.
Okay. Imagine you're back at home. We're not in London anymore. And you're in your kitchen.
Mm-hmm.
And it's 4:30. And you're starting to get a bit hungry. And you open your fridge. And as you open your fridge, the first thing you see is a rich, juicy, waxy, yellow lemon. A little bit like the one from the Amalfi Coast. It's got like a little green leaf just lightly coming off it, and it's just shining. And you're looking at that lemon and you're thinking, I really want to make a really delicious soda with lots of fresh lemon in it. And then I'm also going to make a delicious salad. So you pick up that lemon and then you cut the lemon open very lightly and you see the juices of the lemon just kind of trickle through your hands. What's happening in your mouth right now?
Yeah, I mean, I've licked my lips twice. I've swallowed twice. My palms have even got a little sweaty.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Yeah.
Yeah,
So you
that's yummy.
can open your eyes. There's no lemon.
Yeah.
But your brain has started your digestion already.
Yes.
Right? Your saliva has started to be produced, and we produce saliva to help break down the food that's in our mouth. So even the visualization of food starts these mechanisms that you're ready to go.
Yes.
You're ready to start your digestion. Your food's preparing your body,
Yeah.
even when there's not food there.
Yes.
The simple visualization, the power of mindset,
Yes.
this also kind of brings into the mindset control, which is why like how we are when we eat is really essential to us allowing these mechanisms to work in full force.
So then neurodivergence in eating, it's a real sensory thing, right? All the senses, actually, from that noise when someone scrapes a plate being just horrific to the crunch and the sound and the texture and the taste and the smell and eating with your eyes. And like, it's a amazing set. That's why I love drinks and plants and stuff. It's an amazing sensory experience.
Hugely.
But for neurodivergent people, there's so much that can be problematic and challenging around that. Do you have any?
Yeah, I have so many.
Yeah, tell me about your sensory, I want to say icks, I guess, with food.
So I think I said to you before, I was only tested for dyslexia, but I've definitely got this kind of crossover. And I've realized it more from my niece who's autistic. So I had to stop eating in their kitchen because their lights were so bright. I'm very, very affected by bright lights. And my mum, who can be very aware that anything's going to go wrong at any point, when I was younger, would never let me have candles. But I always had this like burning desire to only have candles in my room. I didn't like lights. No, I never obviously made the connection. And now being older, living in my own home, everything's on a dim and nothing can be bright. So my parents actually had to change the lights in the kitchen so I would go back in and eat it because it was too strong. And I would just feel this huge pressure on my eyes when I was eating. So lights for me is really, really sensitive. The other thing is the scraping of the fork on a plate. Past boyfriends, I would tell them like, you know, can you not scrape your fork? And they'd be like, yeah, and they don't understand. And I would just freeze and not be able to move. And all I could hear was a replay of, and it was so bad. Oh. And it's the only thing that sends such bad, extreme pain through my body.
What about the sound of someone eating?
I hate slurping. You know when someone goes through a straw and you're on a tube and someone's like drinking the end through a straw and you're like, stop, this is so obnoxiously loud. So now I started to realize that that's probably part of my neurodivergent traits, that it's something that I feel and hear a lot more than other people. And it does make me automatically just stop. Like I can't eat if someone's scraping their fork or slurping and there's a bright light. I actually have to leave the room. So I just have to really politely say now, like, I'm sorry, I get really affected by this. I think the fact that I just thought I was being hard work for a very long time, I would just sit through it. Or fussy. It was such a big thing. And actually now I know that like it's just something that I really struggle with and I have to talk about it. I also know that what calms me down is touch. So Harry's here today because he is amazing at kind of calming me. And I had this thing when I was a child that my mum had to always stroke me. And my niece has it. So kind of anything sensory to me is like a very big kind of calming mechanism. So I think there's a lot about, if someone is doing that, I will kind of hold part of my hand and I'll push into the center, which is actually, if you like reflexology, they'll say that's kind of connected to your adrenals and stress response. So it helps calm you down a lot. So I do that when I'm stressed, if someone's not really understanding that
What
this is very
foods
loud.
Are calming?
Anything that's rich in magnesium is very, very calming. Anything that's not high in sugar and glucose and kind of quick releasing carbohydrates is calming. I wouldn't say there's nothing kind of like immediate that you can take, no matter what somebody will say to you, that's ultra calming very, very quickly. The only way that you're going to calm ultra quickly is by breathing in 4 breaths and out 6. The out is what calms you into rest and digest. If you're doing 4 in, 4 out, you're not going to be calm. You're just going to be breathing from up here. It's not going to be hitting your parasympathetic. So the longer out breath is what immediately calms you, not just breath work. You have to have a longer out breath. Otherwise, it's not going to calm you. But there isn't any foods that automatically will kind of calm you down.
So we did our very official, briefing call, Sarah Ann, before today. And you started talking about your family. And happening right now, your exposure to the whole different spectrum of neurodiversity. I just wondered for listeners if you could just talk a bit about that.
So I think there's also quite a sad part of it that I was the first person in my family to openly say I've been given a skill set that is quite unique. And that was kind of quite an interesting one because I kind of felt like a bit of a black sheep in my family. And then my brother told me that it was a year and a half ago, his therapist told him to go and have a test for autism and he's got Asperger's. And even just 6 months ago, he's been told that he's got ADHD and he's in his mid-40s. So for him, that was a huge thing. And there's been a lot of processing. And then my niece was told that she was diagnosed or giving a skill set of autism when she was 10. And who knows, maybe there's parts that I kind of connect to with her story too. But men and women have very different traits to it. And my brother's traits to my niece's traits are totally different. Mm-hmm. And so I think like my niece was very much struggling to kind of making sure that she was fitting in and doing everything perfectly all the time and never wanting to be judged. And so she was then struggling at home to kind of cope with that. And I think there's way more women that go undiagnosed with autism than there is men.
Yep.
So women figure out how to hide it. And that I think is even more sad that many women I'm sure that are going into their 50s, 60s will never know that they have autism.
Everything that you're saying and have just said is like on repeat in terms of the feedback that we get. All those similar stories. And we are hearing from people who are autistic and find out at 65. And that late diagnosed piece is huge. And people are literally discovering their families.
Yeah. I just feel so sad for people getting to that age and never fully understanding or accepting themselves. There's like a lot of, and I don't want to sound like I'm being patronizing, like I feel really sad, but like I felt really sad for myself at 24. I wish I figured out this at 8. So I went through my schooling years not feeling stupid and thick and having to have kind of years of therapy to get my confidence back. I can't imagine getting to 65 because I don't think I would have ever gone on to do what I did because I would never have had the confidence to do it. And it does fill me with a lot of empathy for those people that have had to basically go through their lives thinking they're different. They don't feel that they're worthy because they're struggling to keep it together or they're struggling to keep this perfectionism going rather than just like celebrate who they are.
Yeah. And there's so many people who are being assessed and have that level of awareness now about themselves, which is incredible. But you also hear, and this is my experience too, connected with that, there is a grieving aspect. Whoa, what if I did know? Like you're saying, maybe things would have been different or and therefore it does get into this slight human right to understand yourself.
have a more active language to explain to their partner, to their work, to themselves, like what they need. How you can ever love yourself when you can't understand yourself is such a big topic. And I think, we can all do the self-work, but if we cannot accept and understand who we are, like, we'll never get there.
Yeah, I had just zero understanding. And knowing that I'm autistic and knowing that I'm ADHD has, as you're talking about, categorically changed how I see myself, how I treat myself, how I see others, how I treat others, like hands down. And that happened, at 39. And so ultimately we just want to catch people up so that we've got some level set playing field of understanding so that we can create, just nicer environments for everybody where everyone can sort of think their best thoughts and do their best work.
Yeah. As well, communication sits at the kind of epicenter of this entire thing, which is actually just like an analogy of every best relationship with yourself and your parents and your kids and kids to you.
Yep.
That if you can express how you feel, that's actually where the best understanding comes from.
I would agree. And as I said, we've got to get there.
So I think if we have more love and compassion for ourselves and one another, we'll get there.
Yep.
But we're devoid of it right now.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about, we ask our guests to bring an item. I mean, we sort of say an item because it's not usually a living thing. And the first thing, as you said earlier, that came to your mind
is Harry, which is a Chewini.
So tell us about Harry.
Harry is a Chewini, which people might laugh at, and that's why I like saying it first and introducing him as that. He is half Big Dachshund, half Chihuahua, and he is the most characterful dog you've ever met. I grew up with dogs like I know you did, Ben, and they've always had a massive place in my heart. I always felt as a child, I connected to animals more than I did to humans, and I felt more at peace with them. Didn't really understand why. And he's a family dog, like my brother would say. Everyone in the family has him, but he has got me through some of the most hardest moments, as all of my past dogs have. They make me feel very calm. I feel like they listen to you. They do understand you. They sense you more than anything. And the reason like why you said, bring something that's good for your brain. And Harry makes me feel very calm, very accepted, very happy, gets me out the house for my walks, my mental health. Doesn't make me feel lonely because I talk to him all the time. And I just feel like I feel like dogs have this sixth sense about you. And we know that they're used in therapy. But just kind of having like something else that you're responsible for that loves you unconditionally, I honestly think it changes something with your neurochemistry. Like, I honestly believe that I've got GABA, my kind of calming hormone is heightened, and my cortisol is hugely reduced. And that's good for any brain to make sure that you're in that state. So like when you said like what's good for your brain, I was trying to think of something like super fun or something very distinct. And I just thought, no, actually the first thing is the dog.
Harry is the first dog to be on the
so
Hidden 20%.
I do like that he's the first one.
Yeah. So I just to say thank you. It's been brilliant talking to you. I think the world of nutrition and neurodivergence is absolutely fascinating. I still feel we're at the beginning of that real understanding as we understand more about brains, gut microbiome, nutrition. I think it's a really exciting time in terms of the role that nutrition can play for everybody's brains, right?
Yeah.
But being able to potentially help more neurodivergent brains, I think is really cool. And so I'm glad you're part of it.
Thank you.